The Independent Corrupt Practice and Other Related Offences Commission, ICPC, and other federal agencies has revealed that there is no veritable evidence showing that local government allocation from the Federation account reaches the councils directly, exposing this during a long suspected mystery surrounding local government finance in Nigeria. This revelation reinforces widespread concerns about the lack of transparency, accountability, and autonomy of the local government council, despite constitutional and judicial provisions guaranteeing them such independence. This disclosure was made in Jos Plateau State during a capacity building workshop on the local government accountability framework for 17 local government area chairmen in the state. The event was organized by the Rule of Law and Anti-Corruption Program, funded by the European Union and also implanted by the International Constitution and Institute for Democracy International. Speaking at the event, the Executive Secretary of the ICPC, Clifford Okparawu, lamented that despite the Supreme Court affirming full local government autonomy, there is still no uniform system to verify whether councils actually receive what went to them rather than the funds being released to state governors through the Federation account. They are also channeled through the State Joint Account Committee, and many local governments do not know their exact allocation and only accept what is handed to them by the states. This system makes it planning impossible and undermines accountability. He added that while the ICPC cannot enforce court judgment, the Commission is concerned that non-compliance with such ruling weakens development and transparency at the grassroots. This very revelation has once again sparked the concern and debate about local government autonomy and the rule of law, with the understanding that as a democratic government, the rule of law is sacrosanct and must be obeyed, and also a need for us to talk about it on the show today. And we're talking about local government autonomy and the rule of law. That's what we're having as a major discourse today on the show. We're looking at local government autonomy and the rule of law, especially judging from that very comment coming from the ICPC indicating that most of the monies that normally would have been released from the Federation account directly to the local government account seem not to be so, that many state governors are still holding the local government funds. Well, anyway, to help us really look at this, we have no other person but a constitutional lawyer, and he'll be joining us all the way from Asaba, and we're talking of no other person but Barrister Emmanuel Erire. Barrister Emmanuel Erire is joining us virtually. Good morning and welcome to the show, sir. Hello, Barrister Emmanuel. Can you hear me?
Good morning, Michael.
Okay. Well, nice to have you on the show. Now, this is more like a confirmation of what many had earlier suspected. And it's like almost all the states seem to also do this. And we do know that the 774 local government area still do not get their allocation directly, even after the ruling of the Supreme Court in 2024. Now, I'm really concerned. I know you've been direct as it concerns local government autonomy and all that seemed to have transpired even before the Supreme Court ruling. But I want your reaction as it concerns this revelation coming from the ICPC that up to now, those local governments still do not have their monies being sent directly to them.
Well, thank you, my brother. I think the revelation coming from ICPC is not a surprise to me, because I know that right from when the Supreme Court handed out that judgment, and Nigerians were expecting that 3 months after this, as directed by the Supreme Court, will be paid on the account to the local government account. I knew there was a foul play. And two, whose responsibility is this to ensure that this loan granted to local government is that of the assembly. And I've said it time without number, until the national has to their responsibility as a legislator and not as an errand boy we will still remain where. That is the problem.
Who should be held accountable or who should take the fall or blame for this? Is it the CBN for not releasing the money directly to the local government account, or do you feel the Revenue Mobilization and Fiscal Commission seem not to be doing what they need to do constitutionally to ensure that the money is being directed directly to the local government council? Who should take the fall for this?
Well, I think, in my own opinion, what what is playing out is a game by the federal government. A situation whereby the federal government has given you something with one hand and taking it with the other hand. That is what is playing out. Because these were the same persons who approached the Supreme Court on behalf of the local government that local government autonomy should be granted to local government as a third arm of government, ranking on equal heights with the states and the federal government. And on the premise of such submission for adjudication, the Supreme Court grant all their reliefs and ensure that 3 months thereafter, they should ensure the implementation of the payment of all monies meant for local government directly from the federation account into the local government account. So what that presupposes is that the Revenue and Mobilization Fiscal Committee ought to carry out this responsibility in line with the CBN to ensure that the 774 local governments having submitted their accounts to the federation, they ought to pay their money directly into the account. So if that is not happening since the day the judgment was given till date, and the local government concerned who are supposed to be the recipients of these monies have kept silent, then it is ridiculous that ICPC as an agency will not be the one to come out to tell Nigerians that maybe perhaps they were supposed to be monitoring the disbursement of those funds and utilization of same by the local government. That is why they were aware, or they became aware, that monies ought to have been paid to the local government are yet to be credited to the account for the government. So I think the ROMFC and the CBN are to be held directly, liable for the non-disbursement of this account to the local government. So I think it's a very serious matter.
Well, anyways, I'm happy you said we now have two major institutions that should be held accountable. But you also raised something. You said the government is giving with one hand and withholding with the other. So let's look at do you feel there's a political undertone around all of this? Because the reason I asked, I could still remember in March of this year, we saw governors going to President Tinubu to lobby for those money to be sent directly to the local government account. So do you see a political undertone around all of this?
In fact, you will always perceive political undertone, because if you ask yourself, why are most of the donors defecting to the ruling party despite this issue of local government autonomy granted to local government? It clearly shows that there are serious bargain going on between the presidency and the state governors. Because don't forget that the state governors have been the ones, the custodians of this money. When they receive it from federal government, they disburse it to local government. Now that the narrative is to change, maybe perhaps they now see that they'll be on the losing end, hence their visit to the presidency. But I think if the president is actually firm and sincere in his approach to the Supreme Court on behalf of the local government, notwithstanding any amount of pressure or influence, would change his position for the local government not to receive these funds. But be that as it may, for what is playing out, it clearly shows that there is pressure on the presidency, or there is a bargain ahead of 2027, because all this I'm saying is a play out to what is going to happen in 2027. So they should not use Nigerians as a game of shares to achieve their selfish interests, because Nigerians are not interested who comes to power, whatever interest they have. Nigerians are interested in getting the dividends of democracy, and the people that they can get that dividends most from local government, who are closer to the grassroots. You understand? And when these funds are disbursed directly from account to the local government, the citizens, and the grassroots will be the major beneficiaries of these funds. So if the governors are still trying to see that under Section 162 of the 1999 Constitution, whereby this issue of joint accounts with the state and local government is still operative, and they think that by dislodging them without pronouncement by the Supreme Court will no longer entitle them to those monies. And I think the presidency ought to wake up to its responsibility and reality, as allegiance is to Nigeria and not to the government of the various states of Nigeria. Because whether we like it or not, serious politics is playing out, and those politics should not be played to the detriment of innocent Nigerian citizens who are beneficiaries of this fund. These are taxpayers' money, for God's sake. They are not personal funds that should be diverted or kept for the interest of private individuals.
Yeah, you raised something about the governors wanting to hold the fund. Let's understand why they are still insisting to be the ones disbursing the funds directly to the local government. Is it a thing of power? Do they feel that if they withhold the funds, they will in every way see how they can control the local government to do their bidding? Let's understand. So is it all about power that is playing out here? That's why they always want to hold on to the funds of local government councils.
If we are Bible students, I will still remember when the Israelites wanted to leave Egypt. Pharaoh was so reluctant to allow them to go to the promised land. Now the governors have held the local government to ransom for all these years and have been benefiting from all that is to them. So allowing them to go easily or to be able to handle their funds directly will not be comfortable to them. And even ironically, local government chairmen or the local government as an arm who have been given autonomy, they don't even realize that autonomy has been granted to them in real practical terms, because they still rely on that crumbs that they come from the table from the governors, because the governors are the ones who also put them into power. They are the ones who say you go back or you don't go back. So they have not outlived that shield, that to realize that we are not on our own. So the governors cannot dictate to us. We are also governors in our own various local government. They have not come to that realization. So the governors too, they are still holding firm to that old narrative that them and beg and give them peanuts from which they would utilize funds to the grassroots members of the local government. So that is why I said the presidency, who have taken this bold step, if at all they were sincere in their approach to see that local government actually get this autonomy beyond mere pronouncement by the judgment of the Supreme Court, the machineries, the bodies that or mechanism that ought to implement these funds, which is the CBN and Revenue Mobilization and Fiscal Commission, they ought to wake up to their responsibilities, not waiting for a directive from presidency before they act, because there is already a foundation, a law for them to operate.
Do you see the present development in these councils not going to the amount being naturally allocated to them? Do you feel these governors are indeed in every way hampering direct development of the local government councils by withholding most of these monies? Let's understand. Is it really affecting development in our local government councils?
Well, if we take Delta State, for example, as a case study, we can say that throughout the length and breadth of the 25 local government areas in Delta State, particularly Ughelli where I reside, see that there is no visible projects going on that the people can actually have or impact of the presence of local government in their locality. So that is to tell you that these funds, if they are directly leased or disbursed to the local government chairman, we will see plainly direct projects that are being put in place for the benefit of the citizens of the local government, and which actually was the idea behind the grant of local government autonomy as envisaged by government, which we are yet to see the impact. So that's why I said that it is a situation whereby you give something with one hand and you are taking it with the other hand. So there was no need for those pronouncements or even those exercises by going to the court to allow the court make a pronouncement. At the end of that pronouncement is not being implemented to the latter, particularly the agencies that are supposed to be responsible for the disbursement of this fund. So Nigeria played with their feelings are being toyed with, and it is not good at this particular period, particularly when general elections have been approaching. So the state governors should ensure that it's high time they allow the local government to take a breath of fresh air, and the federal government, who have assured the local government having the autonomy, should ensure full implementation of the disbursement of these funds directly to them. And when these funds are released to them, put in agencies that will monitor the utilization of these funds. And where such funds are not properly utilized, you also know the consequences that will follow for non-utilization of these funds meant for the citizens of the local government. So I think the federal government have to wake up to the responsibility. The state governors have to wake up to the realization that they are no longer in control of the local government, because they are all ranking on the same level as each tier of government as provided for in the 1999 Constitution of Nigeria as amended 1999. So this wake-up call that has been given by the federal government to local government, as we say in Section 7 of the 1999 Constitution, that's democratically elected government, they should be able to see the local government not just an appendage of the state governors or an appendage of the state government, but as an arm of government, independent and operating separately from the state and the federal government. That is where we can achieve the autonomy that has been granted to local governments.
Okay, now let's go straight to finding how we can change the narrative. And the question I want to ask, what should the local government now do on account of this revelation coming from the ICPC to get their funds directly to them, knowing that the Constitution mandates it and also the Supreme Court has given them that clear directive, especially after that judgment of July 2024? What should they now do?
Well, I think what the local governments, I think they have different bodies, Algon and Norgay, which are pressure groups under the local government. I was expecting that before ICPC raised this issue, they should have been the ones as the major beneficiaries to cry out to Nigerians or even approach the courts for the enforcement of this judgment, to say that the funds that are meant to them are actually disbursed to them as pronounced by the Supreme Court. But the reason for their reluctance is what I cannot fashion out. And it's so unfortunate that we allow groups like SERAP and other NGOs to come and claim or make demands for what is beneficial to you and not to them. It's actually ridiculous. So that's why I'm saying that it's either they are yet to understand that the local government autonomy given to them is actually a realistic fact, or it's just a fiction. So either of these, they should be able to, they are the ones to actually come out and tell Nigerians that yes, what actually the Supreme Court have said is yet to be implemented. The funds meant for their benefit are yet to be disbursed by the federal government, or the state governments are still collecting those funds, as opposed to the old narrative that, as opposed to the new narrative that they are supposed to be the major beneficiary of this fund. So I think the local government has lots to do with respect to this. The association, the Algon and Norgay, ought to step up to the reality that they are should actually meet up their demands from the federal government in line with other groups that will not queue behind them. And when the federal government now sees the pressure on them, they will have no other option, whether they are waiting for any go framework to actually disburse these funds, having told them to furnish their accounts to the CBN after the pronouncement of this judgment. So one is expecting that from January this year to date, they would have received the money due to them, and development should have gone beyond the statistics that we are witnessing in various parts of the local governments in Nigeria.
I really want to really understand what you mean. Are you saying they should address the court again, or do you feel maybe a strike action will now compel the federal government to do the needful? So let's understand, are they going to still go back to the court to ensure that the enforcement of that Supreme Court ruling, or should they now take a different action? And what I mean, should they now go on strike to ensure that the federal government does the needful?
Well, it's of two ways. They can go on strike and also go, because now the judgment of the courts that have been given is yet to be implemented or enforced. In other words, there's disobedience to that judgment. So it's contempt itself against the court. So they can initiate contempt proceedings against the federal for not disbursing those funds meant for them. So that's why I said that they can approach the court for a committal proceeding to be initiated against the federal government, which you and I know that it will be a difficult task. The second option is to embark on this action because now, thank God, we're in a global village. Now, everyone around the globe will now understand that the federal government has taken a bold step to give the local government an autonomy. I've given them something with one hand and taking it with the other hand. Then I think with the cries of the local governments and other NGOs on this issue of local government autonomy and the need for them to be giving their funds directly, I think will now be a realization that the federal government will know that they have an obligation to perform. In the absence of this, we will still remain the way it is, and other bodies who are not connected or beneficiaries of this local government funds will not be the ones taking the bull by the horn. It's not. It ought not to be. You, as a major benefactor of a particular largesse, we are supposed to be the one to be at the forefront and not be behind you to say that yes, what is due to you is actually given to you. So it's of two ways. They can approach the court for a committal proceeding against the federal government, and they can also embark on the strike action to channel their grievances. So whichever one they prefer, they will get their results in due course.
Question before I let you go. Now, you talked about the federal government giving with one hand and taking with the other. But many will say if the ICPC came out to give us that revelation, maybe the federal government is now thinking towards the line of readdressing this abnormally. So my direct question now to you, do you see this administration that took these governors to court earlier to get that very Supreme Court judgment, do you see them now having the political will, now that it is now in the open, that these monies are not going directly? Do they have the political will to change the narrative? Do you see the narrative being changed anytime soon on account of the federal government putting their feet down?
Well, I think the federal government has to, in all of it, sincerity of purpose is what matters. So the governors cannot dictate to the federal government on this issue of local government autonomy. They have moved beyond that stage. They have moved beyond that stage. So, and the governors should realize that it's no longer business as usual. So it is up to the federal government and its agencies to do the needful. And doing the needful is to say that the judgment of the Supreme Court should be obeyed to the latter and nothing more. Should be obeyed to the latter, implemented, release this fund. The funds are meant for the local government and nobody else, not the governors of the states. So the governors, they also have their own allocation for the federal government. But that is due to the state, should be given to the state directly from the federation account. So all the agencies that are responsible for that disbursement should be given a directive to implement and carry out the pronouncement of the Supreme Court. And I think that is the way to go in every nascent democracy where rule of law prevails. If actually the president is an advocate of rule of law that he preaches,
Now,
we should
hold on.
see it
That's why
in
I
its
asked you
implementation.
that very question. Do you see this government having the political will to do what you said now? Do they have the political will? Do you see them doing it?
Well, that is the problem I'm having because the one who has the issue of rule of law and due process, I don't think it's the same person I'm seeing as the president of the country, or is telling Nigeria that he was not serious with all these promises that he made to Nigerians. And if he's telling us that he's not serious, that means to say that he's not somebody to be relied upon. But I believe that if he actually is true to his words, he needs not take any permission from anyone to do the needful, because he has started the process. He has given the local government a breath of fresh air. So what is he waiting for? What is he waiting for? So he should have the political will to do the needful. He has a knife, he has everything at his beck and call. So he need not take any further directive on this matter. Delaying it simply means that he's not sincere in whatever cause he's actually fighting for on behalf of the local government. And it's very, very unfortunate if that is the position.
On that very note, we've come to the end of this very discussion. We really need to thank you so much, Barrister Emmanuel Liriri, the constitutional lawyer, and also one that truly holds the local government autonomy dear to his heart. I would really appreciate you for joining us all through this while. I will always say we are with deep appreciation for what you've done. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you very much, my brother, and thank you, fellow doctor.
Well, anyway, it's more like a wrap for us on the show today, but you do know, like I will always insist, the conversation still continues, and it continues on our different social media platforms. Let's have your views, comments, and contribution as it concerns this constitutional issue we've just talked about. We talked about the local government autonomy and why, with the revelation coming from the ICPC, that governors still tend to hold the funds that normally would have directly gone to the 774 local government councils in the country. That these governors, the money still go through them, and rather than being going directly there. But undermining the Supreme Court has given its own ruling on account of these in July of 2024. Why are we still in the same narrative? Let's get your views, comment, and contribution on what needs to be done to ensure that these monies or funds are directly released to the local government and indeed meet the people that they need to meet, knowing that the local government is even far closer to the grassroots than any other tiers of government, and they need to ensure that more needs to come there. But anyway, that's what we'll do, and we've come to the end of this lovely edition. And I will tell you that don't go anywhere, because Atlantic TV, we are really proud to make you feel the impact of enjoying your day all through with us. Bye for now.